support the establishment, which has graciously allowed us to use their lovely premises for our fundraiser. So there are some drink specials. I think there's a Pride drink special. At least I asked them. So go up and ask what the Pride drink special is. It should be good. So really quick though, I wanted to talk a little bit about like why I'm doing this, why I'm putting myself through this awful experience. Since when we first announced and we filed and we held our first event actually here in Wyoming, and that was a Medicare for All rally at Pine Park. So for you locals, that's kind of where this all started. And that's one of the principal reasons why we're also running is, like I mentioned, Medicare for All. Also, pardon the noise from upstairs. I think there's like 5 people up there and they're really having a great party. The history of our community's service in government extends beyond and takes place before the election of Harvey Milk. How many people know Harvey Milk? Okay, well, let me get into some history for you. So Harvey Milk was the first elected person in the state of California who was openly LGBT. He was elected to city council in San Francisco. I know a little while later he was actually assassinated along with Mayor Moscone. It was the mayor and the city council person himself that were assassinated, and that was a bit of a blow to the community. But despite later becoming the face of the LGBTQ civil rights movement after his assassination, Harvey Milk was actually not the first LGBT person elected to public office in the history of the United States. Here in the state of Michigan, Nancy Welchler and Jerry Diegrick were simultaneously the first LGBTQ people elected to office in the history of the United States in Ann Arbor, Michigan. They were elected as part of the Human Rights Party and were tremendous advocates for our community at the city council level in Ann Arbor. So the first LGBTQ people elected in this country were elected in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So Michigan has a history of electing our community to office. Jim Dressler was elected in 1978 to the Michigan State House of Representatives as a Goldwater Republican. He was never openly gay in his lifetime, but he was the first Republican to co-sponsor an amendment to the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act in 1983. And that amendment would have included sexual orientation as a protected class here in the state of Michigan. Unfortunately, he subsequently lost his re-election from his Holland district because of that. It was later learned that he was in fact a gay man, and he actually died of AIDS-related pneumonia in 1992 at the age of 48. Leon Droley was elected as a Republican in 2001 and served until 2006, never serving openly in his lifetime in the state legislature. He led a Michigan civil rights initiative that protected race, gender, ethnicity, or national origin from discrimination, but he conveniently left out sexual orientation. He came out after his service in the legislature, but he never advocated for our community while there. It was only when Chris Colby was the first openly LGBTQ person elected to the Michigan legislature from Ann Arbor. They seem to know what they're doing in Ann Arbor. West Michigan is not Ann Arbor, but I think we can change. I think we are changing. So a Democrat, he previously served on the Ann Arbor City Council and also served as mayor pro tem of the city. He fought for protections for our community at the state level while in office, but unfortunately was never able to pass any legislation to protect us. And that was the first openly LGBT person elected to the state level in the state of Michigan, who was a Democrat, not a closeted Republican, and actually worked for our community. Jeremy Moss was the second openly LGBTQ person elected to the legislature in Michigan's history. He was elected in 2014 from Southfield, Michigan. He has advocated for issues that affect our community as a representative, having previously served the Southfield City Council. And I don't know, some of you may know him, but John Hoadley from Kalamazoo, Michigan, is an openly gay representative representing the city of Kalamazoo. And he was elected in 2014 along with Jeremy Moss, and they're currently serving representative. They're both currently serving still. And he's also up for re-election in 2018 along with our candidate. In the state of Michigan, the only areas that have produced LGBTQ elected leaders have been heavily Democratic jurisdictions, right? Kalamazoo, Southfield, Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan, those are Democratic areas, right? And so you may ask yourselves, well, why the hell is he trying to run in Wyoming, Michigan, right? As a suburb of our wonderful Grand Rapids, Michigan. home of the Dutch Reformed Church. My last name may be Van Kirk, but I'm not Dutch Reformed. But I think it's very interesting to point out that this trend of only electing LGBTQ people in areas that are heavily Democratic is changing. If you look at this year's race in Virginia, we saw just such a situation happen with Danica Roem. How many of you have heard of Danica Roem? She is the first transgender person elected to state government in the history of the United States. A wonderful achievement. We all know who she unseated in her election bid. Yes. So he just happened to be the dickbag who introduced an anti-transgender legislation to their state house in Virginia that would have banned transgender folks from using the bathroom that matched their gender identity. Right? And so she, in his district, he was a 23-year incumbent. She unseated him in the general election by a comfortable margin in a heavily Republican district. And she was campaigning on issues that are very similar to the issues that we're campaigning on. They're issues that affect the people of the district. Like, you're not just an LGBTQ candidate, despite the fact that it's very important to have representation at the state level. Because remember, we have 2 of 110. Less than 2% of our state legislature is LGBTQ, right? So, but she ran on issues that affected her community, including infrastructure repair, right? And that's part of the reason that we're running is to repair our broken infrastructure, because in Michigan we have some of the worst in the country. Because we've had Republicans in Lansing who have habitually gutted our state coffers, our state resources, in favor of giving tax breaks to the already millionaires and billionaires of the state, to the already multinational corporations that outsource their jobs from our communities overseas. And so we're not just fighting for LGBTQ rights. We're not just fighting for Medicare for all for the people of the state of Michigan. We're fighting for the bread and butter issues like infrastructure reform that we all care about, right? Because I know y'all drove on roads to get here, wherever you came from. You were all driving on Michigan roads, and you know they could use some repair. So. But on specifically LGBTQ issues, I don't know if many of you know this, but there are no civil rights protections for the LGBT community in Michigan. You can be fired from your job, denied health care, denied housing, denied public services, all because of your sexual orientation or your gender identity. There is virtually no protections for you as a community. There are some communities across our state that provide some layers of additional protection in the form of city ordinances, right? But the problem is, you change your zip code, you change your protections. And I don't think that that's fair for anyone in the state of Michigan to have to worry about losing their job if they move to another zip code. I think that that's unconscionable, and that has to change. So there's a real simple change to grant us equal rights under the law in Michigan, and that's amending the Elliott-Larsen Civil Rights Act. By including sexual orientation and gender identity, we can take care of this problem of discrimination all across the state of Michigan. Not that it won't happen, because it will. Not that we still won't confront bigotry and intolerance in our communities, but there will be legal protections and legal recourse for us when we encounter it. Because currently, there are none. None in the state of Michigan. In this community in Wyoming, I tried to find a doctor, right? A primary care doctor here in Wyoming, and the response that I got was, "We don't treat members of your community. This is a family clinic." Here in Wyoming. And the fact that I filed a complaint, I went to Spectrum Health Network, which is apparently, supposedly, a pro-LGBT group, and I told them this, and they were like, "Well, you know, we're very concerned by this." And they took my report very seriously and filed it away, and then they sent me a letter informing me there was nothing they could do about it. It was up to the doctor on who he would treat. And I think the important thing for me was to continue on PrEP coverage, pre-exposure prophylaxis. And so part of having a doctor is sharing with your doctor your life experiences, right? And so to be treated as a full person, you have to disclose to your doctor your sexual orientation or your gender identity, right? So it's very important that our healthcare professionals recognize the fact that we are people, that we exist, and that I suppose that we're not sexual deviants, because they referred me, or by the way, or every LGBT person must have HIV, right? Because I talked to them, I said, hey, this is what I'm looking to continue, and they referred me to the public health department's HIV section. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, I'm not HIV positive, I'm taking medication to prevent myself from contracting HIV, that's why I'm on PrEP. This is why I'm trying to go to your clinic, and I'm looking for a family doctor in case I get the flu or something, which I'm recovering from. And they very politely declined. And my hope is that if we elect the right people in 2018, because the entire state legislature is up for election in 2018, along with the governor's office, along with the attorney general, and we have LGBT people and a diverse slate of candidates running all across the state, including Dana Nessel for Attorney General. She is the first openly lesbian candidate, or openly LGBT candidate for that matter, for Attorney General in the history of the state of Michigan. And she is campaigning on the same issues that I'm talking about here tonight in terms of protections for the LGBT community, right? And so that's a race that y'all can get directly into, right? So it's decided, the Democratic nominee is decided at the state convention, the state Democratic convention. And it sounds arcane and obscure because it is, and it's meant to. Because it's meant to prevent you from participating in the democratic process. Because if party insiders in the Democratic Party can have their choice of which candidates they want to put forward, their choice is an anti-LGBT candidate whose family runs, owns and operates an anti-gay church in our own community here in West Michigan. His name is Patrick Miles. I encourage you to look him up. And maybe do a little Google search and find out some of the issues that he campaigned on when he ran for Congress and lost on this side of the state. But find out how much of an ally or not an ally Patrick Miles is. And compare that to Dana Nessel. Because I see the difference as night and day. And I hope that you do too. And I would encourage you all, register for the party. It's free of charge. We can connect you with those resources. Register with the party, show up at the convention, and don't let a party establishment that doesn't care about LGBT rights, whose response when I talked to Senator Debbie Stabenow, a great advocate for the LGBT community, but I asked her why when we had a Democratic Congress, a Democratic Senate, and a Democratic President in 2008, from 2008 to 2010, did we not see the Employment Non-Discrimination Act pass? It doesn't cost money. Does everyone know what ENDA is? It's federal protections. Federal level protections for the issues that I just talked about in employment, right? That's all the bill does. It doesn't cost a dime, it just prevents active discrimination. But she said, and I quote, there were just other priorities. And the problem is, no matter what your minority community is, if you're African American, Hispanic, Latino, Chicano, LGBTQ, or women, there are always just other priorities until we don't let them have other priorities. We have to make sure that our issues are a priority because they will never give it to us. They will never allow us to just have our equal rights and equal representation. And so that's why I'm fighting. I'm fighting not just against Republicans, but against the Democratic Party establishment that doesn't want to see change, right? Because I told them, I think our community in Wyoming is heavily Hispanic, it's heavily African American, it's heavily LGBTQ. And we deserve to have representation that cares about us and not a Republican who ignores us when we go to his office in Lansing and beg for our lives. So this is inexcusable both from Republicans and Democrats that they would give up on districts across this state, give up on communities across this state because they can't be bothered to fight for us, because they can't be bothered to include our voices at the table. So I think I've maybe it's like in the notes, it's like in your own words first. I think I did that. So now before we officially start tonight, I do want to thank all the volunteers that have helped pull this event together, especially Bradley. We would not be here. So I want to especially thank him. He's our director of LGBTQ outreach, right? We have directors, right? We are a well put together campaign. So all of them are here tonight, working for free and donating their time to this event. I don't think I have to tell any of the women in here that makeup can get expensive, and when you're a drag queen, you have to wear a lot of it because makeup for nature's beauty, right? Somebody got it, yeah. I got one laugh for that.
teacher.
So please, anytime during any of the performances tonight, feel free to tip the entertainers. Ones, fives, tens, whatever you want to give, especially if you're enjoying what you're doing. It's not a requirement, so if you don't have any cash, that's okay. But I know they would greatly appreciate any tips they do make tonight. And if you're interested, they do like alcohol as well. So if you lack any cash and want to tip in alcohol, the bar is over there. Just point that out. The second thing that I ask is that during the performance, you stay out of the entertainer's way, and that means staying off the stage. The stage is this little box here. You can see that. It can get a little crazy sometimes, so we don't want anyone getting injured with a stiletto heel or anything. I don't think we're going to get too crazy, but it's just a general warning. With that said, I'd like to introduce our host for this evening. I'm told she has prepared a special performance for us with a special message. So please welcome Hillary Clinton.